Greetings, this is Rabbi Akwetey, and I warmly invite you to join me in this enlightening course, which I have titled The Invention of an Ancestor. Presented from a scholarly and academic perspective, we will delve into the biblical story of Abraham, spanning from Genesis 11 to Genesis 25, with the goal of reconstructing the social historical context in which this founding ancestor was created. We will explore why and how Abraham became the quintessential ancestor of the three monotheistic religions. The narratives in Genesis depict Abraham as an ecumenical figure whose significance has been interpreted differently over time and across diverse religious sensibilities. In this course, we will analyze these stories to understand the multifaceted legacy of Abraham and his enduring influence on monotheistic traditions. I do invite you to stay tuned for a quick snippet of what you can expect in this scholarly journey. Don't forget to click the link in the description box if you want to take the full course, priced at a cool $25 a month. The snippet. We're going to start with the name Avraham, or first Abram, or Abram as we would have it. Now, the name Avram, let me start with Abram. The name Avram poses no issues in translation, as it is a very common and familiar name, as I mentioned last week. It is translated as father, like Av, and then Ram. So Av means father, and then Ram means is elevated, suggesting a sense of height or elevation. So Avram, the father is elevated. Now, one would ask, who is the father in this case? The father could refer to either a godly figure, that is a divinity, a deity, or it could be an ancestor. So the term father could mean this. When it says Avram, the father is elevated. Who is this father? It could refer to an ancestor, or it could refer to a deity. Now, this name was commonly used during the first and second millennia. Hence, dating complications are unlikely to arise. Like I said, the name is common. Examples of this name can be found in Ugarit. We have evidence of this name in Ugarit. And then this would actually pique Madame Pamela's interest, where this name Avram also appears as a female name. And it's pronounced Abirami. Abirami. And we have that in Neo-Assyrian texts. So as I said, the name is quite common. The Avram name is quite common. Hey, Madam Pamela says, yeah. So yes, this is what we know about the Avram, the name Avram. Now, moving forward, the more intricate aspect to explore is the etymology of the longer name, which is Avraham. We have Avram attested in extra biblical texts. We have it in Ugarit. We have it as a female name. But then when we come to the etymology of the name that appears in Genesis 17, the 7th chapter, Now we have to do some work here. So the more intricate aspect to explore is the etymology of Abraham, the name given to the ancestor in the 17th chapter of the book of Genesis. Now, the question that I would ask is it merely a regional dialectal variation, or does it signify a complete and distinct name? Is it a group that, they are pronouncing Abram as Abraham, a regional dialectal variation? It happens. How we pronounce them, Sibolet, Shibolet. It does happen. Is that what we're looking at? Or does this actually signify a complete and distinct name? So we have to consider this. Now, when considering the name Abraham, it becomes apparent that there is a notable absence of distinct parallels outside the biblical reference. This has led numerous scholars to propose the notion that Abraham might have been deliberately constructed as a unique appellation to set apart the former or the forefather of the Hebrew people from other individuals also known as Abram. So it's like this name Abram is attested, is common, like I said, and then Abraham may be an appellation fashioned to distinguish this ancestor of the Hebrew people from the common name of Abram, which was all over the place. So, this is what some scholars propose. Does it hold water? It depends what game you're playing. If you're playing a theological game or you're playing a scholarly one, we have chosen to play an academic one here. So I would have to dig some more. Now, certain researchers have explored the possibility of linking the name Abraham to a specific tribe. So they want to link it to a specific tribe. They do link it, but how valid is this? What you're seeing on the screen is the victory stele of Seti the First. It's called the Bet-Shin stele. The Egyptian Bet-Shin stele is dated to the 13th century BCE. So, scholars are trying to make a connection with a tribe. And this connection was suggested based on this Egyptian stele found in Bet-Shin. This stele recounts a conflict between the Rahamu tribe and then the Apiru. It speaks of the Apirus having attacked this Asiatics of Rahamu. You see how it sounds? Abraham, Rahamu. Okay. So you have the what do you call it? Resh He Mem. You have the alphabets, the root Resh He Mem. So you have that there. So the Apirus have attacked this Rahamu people. Okay, Rahamu, Abraham. So yeah, it sounds it sounds there. It's there. It's getting there. But now, just as an aside, the presence of mentions related to Israel and Apiru on one side, and then Abraham on the other side, led to the hypothesis that Abraham could potentially be the progenitor of this tribe. So that is how the scholars are trying to construct or build this hypothesis, this theory. However, the exact meaning of the name remains uncertain, presenting a challenge. That is not a big deal for me. But if you should ask me, my biggest deal or deal breaker is the geological aspect because it raises very important questions as well. Can anybody guess what the geographical issue is with associating, that's the word I'm looking for, associating Abraham with this stele at Bethshean? There is a geographical issue here. Now, before I go on, can somebody say something so I know that when you speak, I can hear you?
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom. Okay, I can hear you. Thank you, NSJ. So there's a geographical issue here. Why is Abram associated with the north? That's where Bethshean is. When traditionally in Genesis, he is depicted as an ancestor from the south. So this is the deal breaker for most scholars. This is the deal breaker for me. The meaning of Rahamu doesn't really, I don't really bother about it. But then geographically, do you really want to associate Abraham with the north? I don't think the book of Genesis tries to do that at all. He's a southern patriarch. So this issue is actually for me a big deal, and for other scholars, it's a deal breaker. It cannot, it doesn't work, it doesn't fit. Now, I must admit that the tribe Rahamu, they are documented. Okay. But there is no conclusive evidence linking them directly to Abraham. Okay. So this connection doesn't really make it for me. I don't know whether it does for some of you. If it does, I would want to hear it. But for me and some other scholars, this doesn't make it. Okay. Now, another group of researchers took a different approach by examining Egyptian execration texts, which are often older documents dating back to the late 3rd and early 2nd century. Now, these texts were crafted with the intention of invoking magical means to bring misfortune upon Egypt's adversaries. So now we are into these magical texts. Within these texts, a name appears as Abarahanu or Abarahana. The pronunciation varies depending on interpretation. And it's this place is allegedly associated with a city in Galilee. Okay. So now we are into these magical texts, and we find this name Aburahanu or Aburahana. And this is, like I said, allegedly associated with the city of Galilee. Some scholars have proposed that this name is synonymous with the Abraham linked to the Rahamu tribes in Bashan, the Rahamu that we just saw. So some scholars see this and they propose that this name is synonymous with the Abraham linked to the Rahamu tribes in Bashan. So if we go with this proposal, then it means that the name Abraham will then mean father of the Rahamu tribe. Father of the Rahamu tribe. No. And like I've already said, drawing a direct correlation between this tribal affiliation and the name Abraham poses significant risks because the hypothesis, one, remains largely theoretical due to the conflicting accounts found in Genesis, which distinctly positions Abraham within the Hebron region rather than in the northern territories, typically associated with the Rahamu tribe. So this is also a bit problematic. Also, this comparison presents a historical conundrum as it spans a gap of 700 to 800 years. No, it does not fit. And lastly, here, the transliteration, the Rahamu, it's actually coming from an Egyptian text, right? So the transliteration poses further challenges, casting doubt on the accuracy of the Semitic name transcribed in the Egyptian text. So with all these difficulties, I would say that caution is warranted when drawing conclusions from this complex historical narrative. We don't want to go by how it sounds. We don't want to use that as the benchmark and then throw away the geographical difficulties, the narrative in the text. We cannot do that. So this proposal, this hypothesis or theory also falls flat on its face. Any questions here before I move on to the next proposed theory with this name, Avraham? Yeah. Okay, let's move on. Another intriguing possibility, what you're seeing on the screen is the victory stele of Pharaoh Sheshonq. In the biblical text, he's called Shishak. No, and this is his campaign in the Levant. And we didn't mention that his campaign was only in the northern territories. But another intriguing possibility to consider, delving deeper into the exploration of Abraham, is the notion of a potential fort, F-O-R-T, of Abraham. This speculation leads us to the victory stele erected by Pharaoh Sheshonq, who is dated from 930 to 920, known as Shishak in the Bible, which we discovered an inscription at the Temple of Ammon in Karnak. Within this historical account, we know that it's historical, no debate about that. Pharaoh Sheshonq recounts his military campaign in the Levant, documenting various localities. And in his documentation, it included a place that could be interpreted as the fort or field of Abraham in Aramaic. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this fort is that the fort purportedly resides in the Negev region, aligning geographically with associations to Abraham. So it's a pretty important one. It comes quite close. However, our evidence for this connection remains scant, primarily resting on the name itself. Furthermore, one of the other difficulties is differing interpretations, which further complicates the matter. Some scholars suggest that the name could potentially signify ox, which will lead to an entirely different connotation. It's going to be like the field of the ox instead of the field of Abram. It will be the field of the ox, rather than referencing the patriarch. So it remains inconclusive whether a direct connection exists with the biblical figure of Abraham here with this find on the victory stele of Pharaoh Sheshonk. Okay. So we're getting there, but we are not there yet, because onomastics, which is the study of names, fails to provide concrete evidence supporting the existence of a patriarchal era or validating the historical authenticity of the patriarchs. Just using the name, it's a bit shaky or problematic. I would want something more concrete than that. But I must admit, as we are doing honest scholarship, that's what we try to do in academia. I must admit that amidst these uncertainties, it remains plausible that behind the enigmatic name lies a semblance of the original ancestor who inspired the biblical narrative. So I'm not throwing everything away. No, not at all. While these hypotheses cannot be dismissed outright, it also cannot be definitively affirmed due to the scarcity, the paucity of concrete evidence at our disposal. So I'm not throwing it away entirely, and I'm not accepting it entirely. So, in essence, it becomes apparent that figures like Avram, along with other biblical patriarchs, exist as legendary personas that transcend historical veracity. I'll repeat that again. Figures like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, I'll stick with these patriarchs. Can I go on with others? Nah. So Abraham, along with other biblical patriarchs, they exist as legendary personas that transcend historical veracity. And despite this legendary status, remnants of their memory, akin to fragmented puzzle pieces, may endure within names or customs, playing a role in shaping the literary tapestry of these ancient tales, much like the subtle echoes of the Exodus story. So, yes, I wouldn't throw it away entirely. Even though I'm putting them in the category of legend, I would say we have remnants of their memory, which I believe has been captured in customs, names, and it's played a role in shaping these ancient tales. Madam Pamela asks a very important question. She says, how likely is it that the Pharaoh's conquest of a field of ox would be recorded? Very good question. Very good question. I think those who interpret it as such, and Madam Pamela, they're just interpreting as the name, they're using the name and they're translating it. That's why I said I will not hold that just using onomastics to make the argument, because clearly somebody can also take the name and render it as an ox. No. So, good question. Good question. So ultimately, I would say the crux lies in recognizing that the essence of Judaism's its foundation stems not solely from the historical Abram. We're not looking for an historical Abram, but from the intricate narratives woven into the Torah. As I said in the first session, they are not concerned about the historicity of Abraham. That is not what the authors are concerned about. And that is not that's the essence of Judaism, which I've written here as Judeanism. The foundation stems not from the historical Abraham, but from the intricate stories, traditions woven into the Torah. It is written with these narratives. It is within these narratives that the true essence of the patriarchs' legacy is preserved, forming the cornerstone from which our understanding must begin. So it's important. We're looking at stories. We're looking at the narratives. They are constructing, they are inventing this ancestor. So we're not looking for a historical figure, but we're going to look at these narratives, these stories, these traditions that has been woven into the Torah to actually form the portrait of this ancestor, how he was put together, fashioned, and how it all came together, even though we cannot find him historically. Any questions, contributions before now we move on to our methodology and methodologies that has been used in academia to resolve this challenge? Okay, let's move on. Upon a thorough examination of Abraham's narrative, it becomes evident that the story was not crafted by a singular author, but rather exhibits a multi-layered composition. I'll repeat that again. Abraham's narrative, when we examine it, it becomes evident that the story was not crafted by a singular author, but rather it exhibits a multi-layered composition. Why do I say this? Various inconsistencies and divergences within the text points towards different authors contributing to the Genesis account. For instance, the tale of Ishmael's birth in Genesis 16 illustrates Sarah's decision to have a child through her servant, which is Hagar, which contradicts God's earlier promise of a legitimate descendant to Abraham in the preceding chapter 15. Chapter 15, God comes to Abraham and tells him that, no, this is going to be your child. It's not Ishmael. There's still going to be this promised child. In chapter 16, Sarah comes up with a decision to have a child through her servant, Hagar. The deity had just told this guy what is going to happen in chapter 15, that there's a promised child. So in that chapter, Abraham exhibits a lot of faith. So while he exhibits faith in divine promises in one chapter, his actions in the subsequent chapter fail to align with this earlier conviction, as we see in his compliance with Sarah's plan without referencing the prior divine pledge. The child is going to come from Sarai. But now, when Sarah comes with this proposal, Abraham goes along with it. It's a bit problematic. It's an issue, as if one author doesn't know what the other author knows, or you have different traditions. So this discrepancy suggests a lack of coherence between chapters, indicating separate authorial voices at play. So this is number one. Number two, we have the varying description or depictions of Abraham. We saw that last week, ranging from a tranquil nomad in Genesis 13 to a military leader in Genesis 14. We saw this last week. So this further accentuates the diverse portrayals crafted by distinct writers. We have the repetitions of themes and events, what we call doublets. For example, we have multiple instances of alliances. Genesis 16 gives us one, Genesis 21 gives us one. And this is made between God and Abraham. Or we have the repeated expulsion of Hagar. Genesis 16 gives us one, Genesis 21 gives us one. And then we have the repeated scenarios where Sarai is found in a foreign king's harem or abode. We see that in Genesis 12. We see that in Genesis 20. We see that in Genesis 26. Not just Sarai, an ancestral wife, where we have Sarah and Rebecca, pretty much. So Genesis 12 is about Sarah. Genesis 20 is about Sarah. Genesis 26 is Rebecca. So this underscores the layered nature of the narrative. You have different authors actually writing these narratives. We also have the discrepancies, these recurring motifs, along which discrepancies in character behaviors also show up, like Sarah laughing at the promise of pregnancy instead of Abraham. Remember, in one narrative, it was Abraham laughed. And then we come to the second narrative, which is almost identical. It is Sarah who laughs. And also the announcement of Sarah's impending pregnancy by the three men in Genesis 18 appears disconnected from God's earlier declaration in Genesis 17. where the same event was foretold. So it is told to Abraham in one tradition, and then the other tradition is told to Sarah. In that first tradition, I won't say first tradition, in that other tradition, Abraham laughs. In this other tradition, Sarah laughs. So we see these exhibitions of multi-layered compositions. And then lastly, we have the linguistic disparities that occur across the chapters, noticeably in stylistic variations and vocabulary choices. This also hints at different hands shaping the text. There you have it. If you want to engage more with the content, then you want to click the link in the description box to take the full course. See you there. Shalom.